I think our intro didn't play here. Let's do it ourselves. The podcast that breaks compliance box trap and real security advantage. No fluff, just practical strategies. Compliance work for your MSP. I'm Jared, and I'm joined by my co-founder, InfoSec, and Michael Zabar. Today, the live recording. President of sales at Nodeware. You want to introduce yourself?
I'm Matt, Vice President of Channel Nodeware. No, I've been in the industry about 20 years. For many companies, bringing them to dealing with sales. Opportunity to speak all over to MSPs. I love us.
Awesome. Well, I'm so happy to have you joining us today. I think all of our audience will recognize you from the channel and all the work that you do here. So thank you for everything that you do in the channel. Today, we're going to, in this issue, man, I can talk today, I swear. In this episode of Get NIST-Y, we're diving into how to leverage compliance to sell more security services. So let's just jump right in. Compliance is the front door to security conversations, right? You can't be secure without being compliant and vice versa. Or maybe you probably can be secure without being compliant, but compliance gives you that framework to be able to be secure and have some degree of knowledge that what you're doing is right. So Mike, you want to kick us off and talk a little bit about what that security or compliance as a front door for security means to you?
Yeah. So as you kind of said, it kind of builds that framework, and I would actually agree with you. You can't be secure without being compliant, and you also can't be compliant without being secure. And the idea behind that is if you're implementing security tools and trying to become secure with no compliance, then there's no ownership of the security program. And so you are basically spraying bullets from a shotgun, trying to plug holes versus actually taking a systematic approach to security and making sure that you're mitigating risks and putting stuff in place that makes sense to put in place for the business. And so it just enables all those conversations, right? For whether you're using HIPAA, FTC safeguards, whatever else, they're going to start those conversations of getting policies in place, having MFA, doing vulnerability scanning. All those security tools that you need to have in place are all driven by the frameworks.
All right. And Matthew, let me ask you a question, because I mean, how many MSPs do you talk to on a daily basis?
Oh my God. 20, 30.
Yeah. How many of them tell you that their clients are like begging for compliance and want it?
Oh, all the time.
Yeah, nobody wants to be compliant, right? Like we're all becoming compliant because we have to be, right? It's we have to be because of government regulations like HIPAA. We have to be because of contractual regulations like SOC 2 or ISO, right? So we have these requirements that we have to become compliant with. whether we want to or not. And the reality is like 98% of the world does not want to be compliant. There's a handful of like weird people out there that really like enjoy compliance and want to get into it. But that Mike's in that category. But like we're doing it because we have to. And so, what are the MSPs that you're talking to telling you about how they're getting into compliance and using that as kind of the wedge to open the door with their clients?
As you said, nobody wants to be compliant. Half the time they hear, I don't care. I'm not worried about it. But to your point, one of the things we always talk about is literally over 90% of every business out there, no matter what the size, 2 people to 5 million people, have some kind of compliance framework that they must meet. And if they don't meet it, to Mike's point, then they're not secure. And if they're not secure, they're not meeting compliance. And there's a whole circle of chasing your tail. So in speaking to a lot of MSPs, some of the advice I always give them is figure out what the framework is that they have to meet. And then don't frame it around compliance, frame it around the security conversation. Because to your point, cyber liability insurance companies are now demanding that they do certain things that are all part of compliance requirements. So although an insurance company isn't going, are you NIST compliant? Are you CIS compliant? All the things they're requiring fit into every single one of those things. So, you've got 2 options. When your customer needs to be compliant with stuff, there are a lot of them out there that also, if they're not compliant, then you're not compliant and they're coming after you. HIPAA is a great example. If they audit your customer and they're not HIPAA compliant, guess who's getting audited next? You, the accounting department, and the law firm. Because if they're not willing to keep themselves safe, they're going to do nothing to keep you safe. And all you're going to end up with is a lawsuit. And there's a law on the federal books called willful ignorance. And what that basically means, I wrote a really long blog post on it. But basically, I couldn't handle it anymore. I had to. I just had to. I had to get it out somehow. But basically what that says is if it's reasonable to think based on the services you provide that you're supposed to be doing something and you're not, you're liable. That's not, again, not fun. You can look it up. It's fact. So, when you have an MSP, for instance, we do vulnerability management, right? And you have them come in and say, an MSP will go in and say, well, they don't want that. Well, guess what? Tough. They're getting that. You're not going to sell it. It becomes part of your security stack. Compliance should be part of what you do. It shouldn't be a sales opportunity, if you will. It's something you can talk about to customers that have compliance needs. And 50% of the time, they're going to go, oh, yeah. The other 50% of the time, don't fight them. Make what you do part of meeting those compliance requirements.
Well, and that's and that's exactly it, right? Honestly, that's exactly it, right? When you are going out and selling the services your MSP provides, you are selling the services that your MSP provides. You are not going out and selling, hey, I have this vulnerability management. By the way, Nodeware is a great one. So, if, like shameless plug for Nodeware in there, but like you're not going out and selling the tools that you're using. You're selling the fact that you are the expert, that you can go out and do these things for on behalf of your customers to help keep them safe, to help keep them secure. And to make their business run more efficiently and effectively, right? You're helping them lower their risk profile so they can deliver the value to their clients that they need, right? Your job as the MSP is to deliver value-added services to your clients. Guess what? If you don't want to be a break-fix shop, if you don't want to be slamming trunks, you need to be delivering value every single day.
Well, one of the things I always say, and it seems to resonate, so when I present on how to sell cybersecurity services or all that other stuff, what I tell MSPs is, look, stop getting out of your head about, I'm selling this tool. And like you said, I'm selling this piece of it. No, what you're selling is the protection of their brand, their people, and their profits. I'll repeat it again, whether it's compliance, security, or both, you're protecting their brand, their people, and their profits. That's what you sell. You're not selling security. You're not selling the things in your security stack. As a business owner, that's what I care about. And that's what you're selling.
Yep.
Yeah. And the other piece of this is also, as you're looking to put together a compliance offering for the clients, right? you're going to get the policies in place. You'll have your compliance roadmap that's going to say, hey, we need to do all the stuff to become compliant with whatever framework. But then you're going to start managing their risks and helping them manage their risks. And those really start really good conversations. Not the cybersecurity risks. Those kind of go, unsaid. But not the IT risks, because you're supposed to be managing those as well. But actually sitting down with them and saying, hey, what are your organizational risks? What are your financial risks, strategic risks? And as they start enumerating the risk register, pipe up and say, hey, we can implement this to minimize this risk. And, how do we offer those values? How do we become that really trusted partner to say, hey, we're not here to provide security solutions. We're here to minimize your organizational risks, as Matthew said, and protect your brand, etc. So that's another big thing of, as you kind of partner with your clients, talk to them about their organizational risks that are outside of your purview and figure out how you can help them with that.
Well, it's interesting. One of the things that have become a big topic recently, and to me, it plays into compliance in this way. If an MSP is not talking to their customer about their cyber liability insurance policy, you might as well get out of the business now, because the reality is, I think it's right now 90% of all claims aren't paid out. And the reason why is the CFO, the CEO, the business owner that got the cyber liability insurance attested yes to things that they didn't understand and they don't have in place. And so as an MSP, part of your job in building trust and taking care of your customer is going in, looking at that, and sitting down and having a business conversation, because they're literally, if the pieces are not in place that the insurance company's requiring, you're literally throwing money away. Let me repeat, when I say that, a lot of times you go, oh, you're throwing your money away on this. No. I mean, you literally might as well burn it, because you're giving them money and they're never going to pay out if there's ever a problem. The way this moves into the compliance conversation is if you can sit down and have a business conversation about their insurance and how they're not going to get paid out until these things are implemented. I don't know. I take that as a ground floor to say, okay, now I've got them thinking. Now, how do we take it to the next level, which is talk about compliance?
Yeah, I will say, with the caveat of do not fill out the questionnaires themselves on behalf of the clients. Make sure they're filling it out, but have those conversations with them so they know what's actually in place.
Yeah. So one of the truisms in sales is people don't buy products; they buy, or they're not buying the product that you're selling; they're buying from you, right? It's that personal relationship, and part of it, building that personal relationship and that personal rapport, and to keep your customers not just buying from you the first time, but continue to buy and not taking the sales call from the next MSP down the block. Because guess what? There's 40,000 MSPs in the US alone, right? So they're getting those outreach. Your clients are getting, your competitors are trying to poach your customers. How do you keep those clients happy and satisfied and staying with you? You build that trust. You get embedded, and you deeply understand what their business is, so that you can help them deliver value to their clients. Right? At the end of the day, you want to deliver the most value to your clients by helping them deliver value to their clients. Right? Yeah. Get them out of the don't. IT should be an afterthought for them. Honestly, it probably is an afterthought for them, but you want it to be such an afterthought for them that they just know, they have peace of mind and they know it's being handled because you're doing such a good job. And the only way you're going to do that is if you're really thinking holistically across the spectrum.
Yeah, I mean, your thing as an IT people, I hear this all the time. Tell me what differentiates you. Oh, we have the best support. We'll respond 24. Nobody gives a shit. If you're talking about some basic stuff, maybe they care because they've got, part of their company's in Australia, so they want them answered. But your differentiator, like you just said, is how deeply involved are you in their business? How much do they trust you to take care of them from a business standpoint, which, by the way, turns into IT, right? Because you can't run a company anymore without IT and without those pieces and processes in place. So although you're having a business conversation about what's important and you're embedding yourself in the business, guess what? That all turns into IT stuff.
Yep.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think, and we've talked about this on prior podcasts as well, where just having the business conversations. And when you go into your QBR, not presenting IT facts of like, hey, we blocked this much spam, we solved this many vulnerabilities. It's the, hey, what are you as a business looking to do in the next quarter, right? And then, hey, cool, this is how we can get aligned to that to make sure you're successful in achieving your goals. And so it goes back to being that business partner, not just providing IT services.
Yeah. So one of the things that we like to talk about also is how do you use the compliance frameworks, SOC 2, HIPAA, CMMC, to actually drive additional cybersecurity services into your clients, right? So I think one of the things that we see pretty regularly is people saying, and Matthew, you actually probably see this even more so than we do, right? When you're trying to sell vulnerability management software into or a vulnerability management solution into one of your end clients or through the MSP into their end clients, well, why do I need to have that? If you can instead use the compliance framework to help drive that conversation to say, hey, look, in order to be HIPAA compliant, this is what HIPAA compliance means and in terms of vulnerability management. And so guess what? Again, to your point about willful ignorance, there's a requirement. I have a tool and a service that will solve this for you. We can do this. It's easy and it's straightforward. And we're going to manage the whole thing for you. And we're going to make this easy. And guess what? We'll get the alerts and we'll go ahead and patch it and do that remediation and make your life easier. Yeah. Oh, wait, you're going to make my life easier? I'm going to take this headache off. I didn't even know. You're telling me about a headache that I didn't even know that I had necessarily, right? So how do I make my life? This is amazing. I love it when people just make my life easier.
Half the time, you got to understand, they don't understand the IT requirements. They may understand basic policy and procedure requirements, but like you said, vulnerability management, every time an MSP says they're going to go sell that, I laugh. I've got 2 bets out there still for the last, God, it's got to be a year and a half now. I bet 2 of my friends that are MSP owners, they said, and I quote, we're going to go sell Nodeware. Interesting. Okay. I got $500 of my own money, not the company's money, my own money that says you will never go and sell Nodeware. They really have to get to the point where they talk about a framework. They talk about the fact that they can help solve these problems. They can help put together things that are going to make the company run more efficiently, be within compliance, be safer. Because the way I was liking it too, and I know we talked about it, but it's a problem that continues to rise up every time. You going and selling vulnerability management, MFA, and stuff like that. One, half the time they don't even understand what that is. And if you're trying to sell it, then it must be an add-on, because otherwise it would be included. And you know what? I don't buy add-ons. Immediately, the answer is no. But furthermore, do you ever call Uber and say, okay, I got to get from here to here. Now, it must only be a Toyota. It's got to be a Camry. It's got to be 2020 or better. The driver has to be between the ages of 32 and 30. No, you care about getting from point A to point B. They care about protecting their brand, their people, and their profits. That's it. You shouldn't be talking to them about anything you're going to do for that. In the compliance frameworks, it's a business conversation, right? You need to have these things in place in case there's a problem.
Yep. Yeah, no, you're exactly right. And I mean, I do personally call Uber every time I want to take an Uber. I don't use the app. I refuse to, but
yes, but you request a specific type of car.
Yeah, it's got to be. Yeah, I need one that doesn't explode. That's the first step.
So no Pintos.
Exactly.
Yeah. No, you talk about the add-on services. Mike and I were on a call with a vendor earlier today that was trying to sell us some software, and they started talking about SSO and how is it an extra $10 a month per user. And my head almost exploded. And Mike is sitting there frantically texting me, "Hey, chill out." But at the end of the day, we all get passionate because, again, I don't buy the add-on services, right? I'm looking for the one-size-fits-all solution. I want that peace of mind that says, guys, I need to do a job. Let's make this job as simple as possible and get there, right? I don't want all the extras and the bells and whistles. If I want those, I will tell you up front, here's what the base package needs to include. The base package needs to include the, to your point about, I don't want to pick necessarily the brand of car. Sometimes I care about having the Uber Black instead of the standard Uber, right? Or I want the green vehicle instead, right? There may be reasons why I want to choose some level of customization. But again, I'm not picking I want a Prius. I'm saying I want the eco-friendly car. I'm not saying I want a Lincoln Town Car. I'm saying I want Uber Black. You're going to send me a luxury car when I order an Uber Black, but I don't care which one it is.
Yeah, I mean, a 5-person company
Make me happy.
doesn't need scene services. Let's be honest. If you're using a SOC because that's how you're doing your EDR, MDR, and response, great. Then they should get that, because a lot of times I hear, well, they don't need SOC services. Is that how you're doing your reactive security? Because if so, yeah, they do. I know SOC sounds like a big word and everything, but the reality is, yes, they do. You know, one of the things that I find, and I find it interesting, and you guys have learned by talking to me now, I have no filter anymore. I've been doing this too long. I just don't care. And the reality is there are a lot of MSPs that are scared to death of their own customers. They're scared to go talk to them about a price increase or about the fact that they need to do something different, or, you know, oh no, they might upset them. And my theory is always, look, if your relationship is so fragile that talking to them about this stuff or telling them they have to do something that's reasonable and they're going to walk away, you have way bigger issues than selling them security and stuff like that. Your customers should be relying on you like they rely on their lawyer, their accountant, and everything else. You're the subject matter expert. And as long as you're not coming in every other day trying to get them to do something, if you tell them you need to do this, then they should be willing to do it. And furthermore, like you just said, if they need MFA, if that's part of your security, you know they need to have it, stop talking about it. That's part of your package. They get your security package, period, end of story. It's like an incident response plan, okay? Almost every state now requires an incident response plan, and that you report, you self-report if there's a problem. And if you don't have one, oh my God, the money and time you will spend now retroactively putting all that in place, much easier, much more effective to do it up front when you have the time than when you're in a panic.
So,
and you raised a really interesting point there too, Matthew, right? When your lawyer calls and says, hey, there's a thing you need to do, you say, okay, great, let's go do it, right? When your accountant says, here's what we need to do to close out your books effectively, you go do that, right? And you get your books closed. How many of the MSPs out there are getting these questions? Like they'll go and say, hey, you need to do this. And the client says, why do I need to do that? And how much is it going to cost? Right? It's a totally different conversation. And it's mind blowing. And part of that is because we haven't built that trust as IT professionals. We haven't built that trust and embedded ourselves in the business and said, hey, I understand what your business goals are, and I'm helping you achieve your business goals. Right. And so again, it comes back to that building that value proposition for you as essentially the embedded resource that you are going to be there for them and help them be successful. And part of that becomes, to your point, making all this repeatable and like so simple for your team to be able to deliver compliance and vulnerability management and whatever services in your security stack, so that it happens. It's just there. It's part of it's. You're not going back to them every other day saying, oh, hey, there's this new tool that I need to roll out. And it's going to cost you an extra $10 a month per user. What the fuck, Matthew? Why didn't you just tell me this yesterday? Like, right? And because there will be times where something new comes up, right? A new regulation comes out and says, hey, by the way, HIPAA just added this new rule and you need to be able to do X, Y, and Z. I know we didn't talk about it yesterday. It's something new. Here's the regulation, right? But if you've built up that trust, then when the regulations change, when the rules change, you're able to have that conversation. When one of their customers comes to them and says, hey, I've got a client of mine wants to have a pen test. Can you help me out with that? Yeah, I would love to help you out with that. I've got these 3 vendors. Like, we're going to go off and I'm going to work with you to understand exactly what you need for this contract. And I'm going to help you pick the right vendor so we can go off and do this. Cool. Like, let's go. Right. Because you're that trusted resource and they're going to take your word for it. And it might not always be the cheapest one. Right. Sometimes it will be, sometimes it won't be. Right. But you need to have that trust built in. Otherwise, it's going to be a miserable experience.
You're not going to build any trust if you're the cheapest. That is just factual information. If you go in and you compete on price, and I know, easy for me to say, it's not my business. You know what? Easy for me to say. I've been doing this a really long time. And what's going to happen is you're going to end up with the wrong clients that take up 80% of your time for the least amount of profit. And here's what I know. I used to have a sales rep, for instance. I had a staff of 40, and he was building his business. And we'd sit down and review everybody's, once every couple of weeks. And what I told him is, you're building the wrong kind of business. And the reason why is the customers he had were running him ragged with not a lot of growth opportunity. He said, if you keep going down this path, you're going to max at 10 customers. And you're never going to be able to grow. You're never going to be able to make any more money. And it's going to be really painful for you to now have to back up, fire a few of those customers so you can make room for the new ones that you need to bring on. It's the same thing with an MSP. Choose your customers wisely. And one of the things you don't want to do is be the cheapest. Guess what? Let somebody else be the cheapest. Cheapest never, ever wins in the long run, ever.
Yeah, the other thing you guys have both kind of touched on, and Jared and I talk about kind of compliance and security a lot, is like the 401k. You kept talking about, hey, you don't want to get all of a sudden blindsided and you have to do all the security work and massive bill. So talking to the clients about investing over time and starting that journey, and then sure, HIPAA regulation changes. And you need to do something. First of all, it's not going to be overnight. They'll have a rollout period. But more importantly, it'll be like, cool, we're here. We need to do this additional thing. And it's going to be extra $2,000 for the year, whatever, versus, hey, there's extra new regulation and they're going to start enforcing it. And now we have to go from 0 to 100 in a year. And you guys have to drop 500K, right? Completely different conversation.
Now, Mike, you used to be a visa, so you spent a number of years doing that. How did you make sure that what you were delivering to your clients was repeatable and scalable?
Yeah. So we didn't do a good job of it. It was a lot of spreadsheet work, which is kind of why we started Blacksmith, right? It's to be able to make that scalable. You need to be able to have some way to have a platform to keep track of clients, to be able to say, hey, I need to make sure that client ABC need to know that they're doing this, and client DEF need to make sure that they're doing this. But basically standardizing stuff as much as you can. And again, you're going to need to tweak things so that each client is not the same. So you need to make sure that what you're deploying and what you're providing to the client is applicable to them. But at the same time, you need it standardized enough. Like any other MSP service, you're not going to support 3 different vulnerability solutions and 10 different firewalls and etc. You need to standardize enough for the clients to say, hey, we can do this in a repeatable fashion and make sure that the clients get the compliance and we're offering the services they need. And on the back end of those compliance frameworks and controls, we have standardized tools that can provide that, right? We're going to use the same firewall for all of our clients or get them to there. Once we onboard them, we're going to use the same vulnerability management tool. It's all really about standardization so that it's scalable.
Excellent. Cool. So let's talk about sales, right? And Matthew, you're like the king of sales here. So I'm going to turn the microphone over to you for a second, but like, how do you shift the conversation? Again, if you're trying to sell security, compliance, things like that, as an MSP, selling that into your clients, what are some of the techniques that you have used to not sell FUDdy, not sell fear-based? Because to your point, being the lowest or the cheapest price is not going to win you a whole lot of business. Being the scariest might win you the business in the first place, but all that means is that the next person who's even scarier than you are is going to steal your customer from. So how do you sell and get land that client in the first place?
Oh, honestly, and I know this sounds trivial and silly, but doing an effective discovery call. My goodness, one of the things that I teach a whole, I guess you could call it seminar on how to do an effective discovery call. And basically all the discovery call is, for those of you that don't know, because it gets glossed over, is putting together a set of questions that are open-ended and give you information that you're looking for so you can make intelligent decisions about who the client is, what they're open to, what they're closed off to, and if they're a good customer for you. So one of the things I always tell people is, I give about 50 different questions in this presentation, but figure out don't ever ask a question that you don't know the information you're looking for. Like my wife's a lawyer. They always say, don't ask a question you don't know the answer to. Well, you're not going to know the answer, but don't ever ask a question that you don't know what you're trying to get out of them. So you know if you need to ask a follow-up question to dig down. If you do an effective discovery at the end, you should understand, what is their appetite for security? What are they currently doing? What is their attitude towards security? What's their attitude towards an MSP, meaning in what they're able to do in their recommendations? At the end of it, you should know whether they're a good client for you or if there's someone you should run from. Now, they've got customers currently, right, where they turn around and say, okay, well, they're not buying security now. Great. My question always is, well, why not? Because it's expensive. Okay, well, why not? Well, because it's a lot of money. And again, why not? Why do they think it's expensive? They don't think it'll happen to them. There we go. And I'll teach them the objection comeback for that. Because the reality is, if you really have someone that doesn't care about their business, run. There's no sales process that's going to overcome someone that just doesn't care, no matter what you say. And as far as the financial conversation, you have to turn that away from, let's not talk about money for a second. I know money's important to you. Let's talk about how your business needs to be kept safe. What would happen tomorrow if you had to lay off half your staff because you got breached? What would that look like? Now, that's a horrible question to ask, but you're putting them inside their head about their business, not about the latest Home Depot hack or Target hack or whatever. And, it's an open-ended question, so they have to answer it or they look really stupid. Or they don't answer it, at which point, again, run. I mean, they're not willing to have a conversation with you. So my thing is always, if you do an effective discovery, if you ask the proper questions, especially around security, you're going to know real well by the end of that who you're dealing with, what they think and don't think, what they think is important and isn't important. So you're taking on a client that you can actually work with versus one that just doesn't care. Because again, I'll reiterate this a million times. At the end of the day, if they're not willing to protect themselves, then they're not protecting your business.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, I even zoom out a level, right? So you're asking, what if you had to lay off half your staff because you got breached? Right? Let's take a step back. Well, what would you have to do? Let's say you got hit with a $500,000 ransomware attack. Well, then what, right? And then they'll tell you, hey, by the way, let's see, if I had $500,000, I'd probably have to lay off half my staff. Oh, what would that mean? What would that do to your business, right? Would your customers come back to you tomorrow, right? And I think we've seen plenty of businesses that have been just fine after a ransomware attack, and some businesses that have not been fine, right? But getting them to think through what that looks like and tell you, hey, what's a valuable number for me to get some peace of mind, right? Essentially, the IT services, cybersecurity services, is a form of insurance, right? You're lowering your risk profile, right? Nobody can guarantee that you're not going to get hacked, right? It's just
impossible.
If somebody wants in badly enough, they will find a way in, right? We've seen that over and over again. However, if you can lower the risk profile, if you can make yourself easier harder to be breached, less likely to, right? There's all kinds of folks out there that are we call them kitties, that are just like trawling the internet to try to find anything that they can, any little holes. But as soon as they find a chink in the armor, they just poke at it because they can. Right?
You make a great point, because one of the things I tell MSPs all the time is, how do you answer the question of, it's not going to happen to me, or nobody cares about me? Well, the first thing is, you're right, nobody gives a shit about you because you're too small to make the news. And also, most small business owners aren't running around going, I got hacked. Hey, by the way, I got hacked. But you just explained it perfectly. What I always say to them is, you're right. Nobody's sitting outside your company, your 5-person company, going, I want you. However, you're in a ballroom. It's 20,000 square feet. I drill holes this big all over the floor. Some have lids, some don't. I take 10,000 marbles and roll it down a 20-foot ramp. You willing to take that chance? Because if it falls in your hole, you're toast. And that's literally, to your point, what they're doing. You're right. They're not trying to attack you, but they're looking for the ones without the lids. I don't know about you, but 10,000 marbles, that's a pretty big risk.
Yeah, you know,
and I like the old joke, the two guys out in the woods and they run into a bear. One of them bends down to tie his shoes. The other guy says, "Hey, you know you can't outrun that bear, right?" And he says, "I don't need to outrun the bear. I just need to outrun you." Right? So like security services in my mind is like selling people fancy sneakers, right? Those sneakers aren't like, you've got sneakers on versus somebody who's in penny loafers. Guess what? You're probably going to outrun them. Although I have seen some people run pretty fast in their flip flops, so like not always a guarantee. But at the end of the day, again, you're trying to give people that little bit of an edge that helps them be a little bit more secure, so that they're not the hole in the floor or the marbles are going to come falling through. That they're going to be, marbles will go right over, and they'll be right past them. Because to your point, unless you are out there actively pissing somebody off, you're not likely to be a target.
Yeah,
where you become a target, where you make yourself a target is when you open your mouth and say something stupid. I do that frequently, and Mike has to constantly rein me in, right? So this is why Mike's the nice guy and the good looking in the face of the company, and I try to stay in the background and keep my mouth shut as much as possible. So unless you're saying something stupid, or unless you are like so willfully ignorant or willfully negligent that you are just leaving those holes open and not putting the door on your holes and letting the marbles fall through, you're probably not a target. You're right. But if you're going to be willfully ignorant, you're going to end up finding somebody who just scratches the surface and says, "Ooh, there's something there. Let me go in," right? And again, it's those vulnerabilities, right? If you leave the hole, if your firewall isn't patched properly and you've left a vulnerability, and somebody gets in and they exploit that vulnerability, because guess what? Those are all known. And once the vulnerability's been out there for a short period of time, people start putting proof of concept exploits out there. And now all of a sudden you've got hackers that just say, "Oh, I can," and guess what? With generative AI, I can say, "I found this thing, go write me an exploit for it." And generative AI will go and write you something. And it doesn't have to be perfect, right? It's one thing to write production level code using generative AI. It's another thing to just write a quick script that goes and hacks somebody. One of those things does not need to work 100% of the time. And so who cares if it's perfect or not perfect, right?
10-year-olds are doing it now. Literally 10, 12, 15-year-olds are, I tell people this and they look at me like I'm crazy. I'm like, I'm dead serious with AI, that they're learning stuff and they're creating stuff. And you know what? They're doing it for fun.
Yep.
And eventually they're going to grow up and go, "Well, wait a second. If I can do this easily, I don't need a job. I can just, because again, I got news for you. If I can hit 5 of you in a night, much easier than hitting a bigger company. Yeah. I just hit 5 of you a night. Your credit card spend the same way. Your customer information is just as valuable. Great night's work. Thanks. Next. I'm going out and having a drink."
It's interesting.
And I don't. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Mike.
I always ask them the question of, "Do you lock the door to your house?" And they're like, "Yeah, why?" I'm like, "Well, why do you lock the door to your house? No one's actively trying to ransack your house. Why do you lock it?" Because you don't want the local neighborhood boy walking in and just being stupid, or you don't want someone walking by just checking doorknobs, right? Like, same idea here.
People don't think of their business in the same way they think of, like you said, their family, their personal possessions, right? All this other stuff. It drives me bonkers that you would buy life insurance, health insurance, buy locks for your doors, get cameras for the outside of your house, but then think, "I don't need to worry about my business." Well, dude, how do you think you afford all those things?
Yep. Well, another piece of it is kind of going back a little bit to the ransomware question that you guys posed of saying, "Hey, if you got hit by a ransomware, $500,000 with the ransomware payout today, how would you deal with it?" A bunch of them would say, "Hey, we've got cyber insurance for that." Great, that's awesome. I'm glad you have it in place. What did you attest when you filled out that cyber insurance questionnaire? Because guess what? If that's not in place, they're not paying out. And so you're still at that $500,000 or whatever. And again, bring it all back to, what do you actually have in place? Because that's all that anyone cares about.
It's not simple. I'm not making it out like it's simple. I'm just making it out like you have to have, okay, I'll say it because I just don't care. You have to have the balls to have the conversation with your customer. And I know there are people out there going, you don't understand, it's harder than you think and whatever. You're right. I'm not saying it's easy. I'm saying you need to have the conversation. If you have someone telling you, I don't care about my business, no matter what you say, no matter how you say, I don't care about go find a new customer. You don't need to be wrapped up in that, because all it's going to do is hurt you in the end. Especially, let's take it back to insurance for a second. They attested to things they didn't know. They're not meeting those standards. They get breached. Guess who's not getting paid to fix it because they're not getting paid out? You guys. It's just, again, I understand a lot of these people are tech people and not business people, but there are so many resources in the channel that are willing to try to help and encourage and provide knowledge. It drives me crazy sometimes because, look, people need to learn. That's fine. And people need to consistently learn. And again, I'm not calling out anybody that doesn't know better and needs to learn. I'm calling out the people that you talk to that know darn well what they should be doing, because they'll tell you they know they should be doing it and just aren't doing it.
Yep.
All right. Well, so in the interest of time here, because I want to be respectful of the folks that are watching the live recording here, we did have some audience questions. I'll see how many of these we can get through. But the first one, Matthew, you talked about not being the lowest price provider out there. So how do you price security and compliance services so that you can be effective and competitive without necessarily being the lowest priced out on the block?
Well, a couple things. First, understand your market. What are other people charging, right? You can get together. There are a lot of these groups out there. They're called MSP peer groups. And you can get involved in one. And people will tell you what they're charging, what they're getting away with in certain areas. The other thing is simple, and it's something MSPs don't like to do, but it's critical. If you went out and did something like this, what would be your cost? What is your cost? It doesn't have to be to the penny, but if you went to do something, what is your estimated cost? And then you should be able to make 40 to 50% margin. That seems to be the figure across the country. Some make more, some make a little less, but on services and stuff, I hear 40 to 50% all the time. So there are two ways to do it. Get with other MSPs, not necessarily right next to you, because they may not want to talk to you, the competitor, but find out what they're charging for similar services, as well as if you know what your actual cost is roughly to do this kind of stuff, then mark it up. And you're making a profit you can be okay with. And then it falls where it falls, because if you can't do something and make a reasonable profit, again, with that customer, you may need to walk away.
Yeah, you bring up a really interesting point there also, because I see folks all the time on Reddit asking, hey, what are you charging for this? Guess what? If you pull a bunch of random strangers on the internet, and don't get me wrong, MSPs on Reddit are generally very honest about what they're charging, what they're not charging. But you're not talking to your peers, right? If you're having to ask these questions and you're not talking to your peer, you're going to get a very wide variety of answers, right? You're going to get folks from around the country or around the world who may or may not be charging the same way that you're charging. You may be getting people from, if you're in a low-cost geo and talking to somebody in a high-cost geo, you're not talking to, even if you're the same size MSP, you're not talking to a peer, because the cost of labor is significantly different. And so you need to be finding those peers that are giving you honest feedback about what they are charging in their market that is the same as your market when they're at the same size and scale and operational maturity level that you're at. Because otherwise, you're getting a bunch of unhelpful information.
And the other thing is, as you go to market, right, if you're not pricing it as a package and you're pricing it pieces and parts, here's the hardware, here's the software, here's the service. No, here's what it's going to cost to do this, period. Don't let them try to break out every little piece so they can look at someone else and go, well, their vulnerability management software is $10 a month cheaper than yours. No, it's a project price to do it. And that's what it is. You can't break out pricing anymore. The more you break it out, the easier it is for someone to come in and say, well, they're cheaper. Why are they so much cheaper?
I mean,
Because I'm providing real security services. That's why.
you could, Matthew, you could take the Spirit Airlines approach to MSPs and say, here's your computer. Oh, you want a hard drive in there? That's a fee. Oh, you want RAM? That's a fee.
Exactly. Look, I'm going to help you get NIST compliant. Everything there, physical, administrative, and technological. Okay. Based on where you need to be. Here's my project plan for the next 12 months, because you're not going to get them there overnight. It could be 24 months. Here's what it's going to cost you a month for us to do this. Period. That's the project price. You can't let people break out stuff or charge hourly for stuff like that, because you know what? God forbid you go over. You've worked that into your margin already, the possibility of going over. God forbid you go over and tell them you went over 2 hours. Oh, the world is now ended.
Yep.
For the customer, not for the MSP.
Well, right. Yeah. No, it's because yeah, once you start getting into that, now you're just a chunk slammer again. So
Well,
hey, let's get out of that.
and I think the whole point of this is to provide your clients with predictable pricing, right? So you can say, hey, our services are gonna cost whatever, pick a number, $20,000 a month. I don't know. And they can budget for that. They can expect that. But if it's 10,000 one month, 15,000 the next month, and 5,000, like, clients don't like that either.
And by the way, if you're already offering services to a client, now you're going in to sell compliance services. It's okay to say, okay, in order to do this, it's going to cost an extra $1,000 a month. There's nothing wrong with that. You don't have to do it with the price you gave them. It's an add-on, So understand, nobody's saying you have to go in there with the $2,000 a month you're already charging them and go, oh, okay, we'll do this work. No, this is for the normal day-to-day stuff to get you NIST compliant, CIS compliant, whatever it is. This is boom. This is what the extra is going to be in order for me to do this for you.
Awesome. I think we have time for one more quick question. Last one from the audience. What is the biggest mistake MSPs make when trying to sell compliance or security? Mike, you're laughing. You answer first.
Oh God, where do we start? No, I think a lot of it is they are trying to sell an IT service, and again, they're not trying to be that business partner, right? They're trying to come in and fix an immediate problem versus partnering with the business, developing what makes sense for the business, working the program month after month. They're trying to come in, say, hey, we're going to do this. Perfect example is there was an MSP I was working with, and they were trying to get compliant with a framework that I'm not going to mention, but it required vulnerability scanning. And they said, hey, cool. Bare minimum is once a year, so let's do a yearly vulnerability scan. Why? Like, what is that going to mitigate? It's, yeah, sure, it'll check the box as far as the requirement, but it doesn't actually provide services, doesn't actually provide security, doesn't solve for anything. And so, again, a lot of this is don't just try to do an endpoint solution, provide the service, be the good partner to the business, and grow it.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things I see is it's a business conversation. Too many MSPs go in and try to sell technology, right? They're selling the technology to meet the compliance framework. No, a compliance framework is all about mitigating risk, but that's risk from how someone passes an HR document and gets stored to scanning the system for vulnerabilities and when they should fix it. Have a business. This is about business. This is not technology fixes the business problems, not vice versa, right? Or should I say the business issues? Technology is part of that. It is not a whole solution. And I know a lot of MSPs say, well, that's what I sell. That's fine. But you're wanting to sell compliance. Part of compliance is the physical and administrative. They're in the frameworks. And I got news for you. There are silly companies like, Blacksmith InfoSec that has a product that will walk you through those other stuff and help you be the subject matter expert. The other thing is there's nothing wrong coming in and talking about it from a business standpoint and bringing in someone that can help underneath your banner with the physical and administrative if you don't feel comfortable doing that. But don't go in with a compliance framework. Go, well, it requires vulnerability management, this, and this. So here's what it's going to cost. You didn't help them with compliance. You sold them a bunch of software and services that do about 1/20th of what they actually need.
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. If you come in trying to sell them the point solutions, their eyes are gonna glaze over because they don't know or care or understand any of this stuff. And it's your job as the trusted provider, that technical service provider, managed service provider, trusted service provider, whatever acronym you want to use for what you're selling, be that trusted partner so that you can actually help them run their business and take all of this burden off of their plate to make their lives easier. Well, Matthew, thank you so much for joining us today. Appreciate your time. For those listening, we will be at IT Nation Secure June 2nd through 4th. So please join us at our booth, hang out with us, and then stay tuned for next month when we'll be doing a recap of IT Nation Secure, talking about what we learned, what we saw, and we'll pick it up from there. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.
Take care.
Get NIST-Y. Yeah, we're bringing the heat. Cyber strong compliance on repeat. Get NIST-Y. Let's secure your fate with Blacksmith InfoSec. Don't